What's the role of religion in American society? Is Christianity antithetical to America's idea of liberty? And what does it mean to be an American? I'm Richard Nelson, host of the Commonwealth Matters, and we're going to tackle these questions with Dr. John Wilsey, professor of church history and philosophy and chair of the Department of Church History and Historical Theology at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. Dr. Wilsey recently wrote a book called Religious Freedom, a conservative primer. John, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Glad to be here with you.
Hey, I had a chance to review your book. I didn't read all of it, but I read portions that were fascinating. I think it's fair to say that it's academic. It's also provocative. And you give a fair treatment towards religion and the balance between religion in public life here in this nation. And I'm going to start out with this. John, your book is framed in the terms of maintaining the balance between liberty and religion. Now, we live in a postmodern age where religion is looked down upon, and I think it's fair to say that secularists view religion as maybe okay in church or synagogue, but it has no place in the public arena. And I experienced this firsthand with my work at the Commonwealth Policy Center. So how do you respond? Because you're making the case that there is a place for religion in public life and in the public arena, and actually you go even further than that. But how do you respond to secularists who say, yeah, there's really, keep your religion in your churches and in your places of worship? How do you respond?
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's a real privilege and an honor to be with you, Richard. I think you're doing incredible work, and your whole team here is doing just absolutely invaluable work for the state of Kentucky. And I am a citizen of the state of Kentucky, and I'm very grateful to your work, for you and your work.
Thank you, John. Can I take you with me to the next presentation I give?
Absolutely.
I'll be out tomorrow speaking to a group of Republicans, so maybe I'll take you with me.
I'll be your biggest fan.
Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah.
But to answer your question, religion, I mean, we are religious people. I'm a religious person, you're a religious person, we're Christian people. And so it wouldn't be a surprise to a secularist to hear us talk about the benefits of religion. But religion as a category is necessary in the public square because religion, in short, gives people a broader view of life beyond their own selfish interests in their own world. It forces people out of their individualistic, sort of selfish world or self-centered world and gets people thinking about other people and gets people thinking about another world to which they're going to go. This is a book from a conservative perspective, and I make the case in the book that one does not need to be a Christian to be a conservative, and one doesn't even need to be religious to be a conservative. But conservatives, traditionally, historically in America, have always respected and revered religion and held religion up as necessary to freedom in America. So in short, that's how I would answer that question. Religion gets people out of their own little world and puts their mind on the needs of others, and also to another world to which they go.
John, let me push on that just a bit. Can't somebody get out of their own little world and have a broader view and maybe be motivated to having goodwill towards their fellow citizens apart from religion? Can't they subscribe to a great philosopher or another leader or a set of ideas? Or is it only religion that can really do that?
The answer is, of course, they can. People can. People do. People do that every day in every community in America. But I would say this about religion. Religion gives you the strength to sustain that effort, especially in times when it gets tiring and exhausting, and you don't really have any desire to do it yourself. Religion provides you with an impetus to keep going. Because as anybody knows who serves others, service to others is long-term, exhausting work that's often thankless and often doesn't yield results. And a religious worldview sustains us in the effort.
If I could add one other thing too, is that just subscribing to philosophers or great leaders or historical figures, they're on the plane of being fellow humans. They're on this horizontal plane, whereas religion subscribes to a higher power. And as Christians, we believe that there's a creator who spoke the world into existence, who created the moral law, the natural law, and there's that vertical relationship that human beings have, and that's where I think the sustenance comes from. It's not just another mere mortal that we're subscribing to their tenets or their philosophy, their teachings, but it's the creator of the universe. Yeah. So I'm gonna push on what I just put out there a little further, and I'm really fishing for your input. But isn't that hubris to believe that? I mean, isn't this what seculars say? That's fine, Richard and John Wilsey, for you to believe. That's just hubris for you to believe that. Mm-hmm. How do you respond? Because this is where we are as our culture. There is a serious antagonism in America in 2025 between secularists and those who are hold religious tenets, particularly Christians. There is real conflict and division there.
Yeah. Well, I would say that it comes down to what truth is. What is the nature of truth? We don't live in a relative sort of a moral relativist kind of a worldview on anything else except for religion. So when it comes to going to the bank and withdrawing money, I would never suggest to you that, well, that whole process for you as you do that, and that's fine for you, but I don't need money in life. I don't need that. But that's good for you. I'm glad that money is providing for your needs and makes you happy. But I just don't need that. I mean, we don't make those kind of statements about anything else except for when it comes to God. So I'll put it to you this way: if it's true, if it's a universal principle, practically speaking, that money is what makes life and activity possible for everybody in America. That's a truth that holds for everybody, and we live that way, and we take it for granted. The same thing goes for the truth of God's existence and God's supremacy over our lives. If that's true, then it doesn't matter what you and I think about it or what this person over here thinks about it. If it's true, then we live by it, and the consequences of that truth dictate how we pattern our lives. So even if you're not a religious person, you still live under the patterns that the Creator set for our practical patterns of life. And those things are important because they mean that we take truth seriously. And from a conservative standpoint, I think all conservatives would want to take truth seriously, but I think all people want to do that too.
Practically, John, I think that that our American society has subscribed to the idea that truth is relative, that government can redefine terms. I think of marriage that was redefined by the U.S. Supreme Court back in 2015, where gender is being redefined. We live in Carl Truman coined this idea or came up with this idea, the age of expressive individualism. You might not agree with it, but don't tell me how to live. Even if I believe I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, right? And if you try to tell me differently, you're imposing. The point here, though, is that the prevailing regime and the mindset is that truth is relative. Would you say that at this moment in history where people have seen that the idea that you can redefine your own gender, that's gone too far? I think there's a strong pushback against that. Is this the point? Is this maybe a watershed moment where our society is saying, well, hold on, maybe truth isn't relevant? There is the biological category of male and female, man and woman, and there's reasons why we have girls' sports teams and private spaces for women. Is this a watershed that we're seeing? Because we've seen it electorally, and we're seeing it public policy-wise. States are pushing back against this idea that you can redefine your own gender.
Right.
But do you see this as a watershed where we're pushing back against the larger idea that truth is relative, maybe?
I have hope for that. I'm optimistic about that. I think that there comes a point where you can kick against the goads with truth for a while. But after a while, you have to admit that there is an order to the world that you have to subscribe to. You know, there's a difference between liberty and libertinism, or freedom and license, liberty and license. And what makes the difference between one and the other is where order fits. So the objection that you're forcing your beliefs upon me, or you're dictating to me how I should live. Well, that's, when I drove out here, I had to follow a speed limit. I don't get to just drive however I want. I don't get to just put other people's lives at risk. There's an order there, and if I break the law, then there are going to be consequences to that. We live every single day in ordinary, forgettable ways. We live by order all the time, not just with the law, but in our human relationships. We're faithful to our wives, where we tell the truth to our friends and our business associates. That's order, and that's what makes us free. And when we insist on living by our own rules, and when we insist on telling people that they can't tell us how to live, that's libertinism. That's license. License leads to anarchy. Anarchy leads to tyranny. And religious freedom is one of those core, fundamental American traditions that keeps us free in an ordered way.
Very good. John, I've argued in the past that the church and state shouldn't be opposed to one another, even though there are separate institutions with defined roles. They have their own lane that they're in. But I've argued that when the church is discipling a congregation, teaching the moral law, encouraging the members to be good neighbors and good citizens, that the church is an ally to the state. Absolutely. Right? The church is teaching individuals the idea of self-government, moral restraints. And I've argued that Christians should be the best citizens, absolutely, so long as the state doesn't violate conscience.
Absolutely.
But in recent years, we've seen the state and federal level violate conscience in a number of ways, particularly when it comes to sexual boundaries, the idea of marriage, the idea of serving, in a same-sex wedding ceremony. And the courts have sided with religious freedom and with conscience rights, protections for Christians. I think of Jack Phillips, for example, the baker in Colorado. Sure. It's probably the most notable case. Yeah. And yet these challenges are still there. There's a bill in front of our state legislature right now, Senate Bill 60, which strengthens Kentucky's RFRA law. It's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and it would provide a cause of action to somebody who has had their religious freedom violated or their conscience violated. And at the committee hearing I was able to attend, there were LGBTQ advocates there, and they were saying that it was wrong, that it could undo, in particular, they were implying that it could undo the fairness laws that have been enacted in Kentucky. And for the viewers who aren't familiar with that, these are laws that elevate LGBTQ identity to protected civil rights status in areas of housing, employment, and in public accommodations. And anyways, they were opposed to this Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which would strengthen conscience rights. So John, that seems to be where much of the tension is. It's between sexual identity and perceived rights and conscience rights of citizens. Is there a balance in that, or is there how would you address that? Is the state legislature on the right path to strengthen religious freedom rights, or is it indeed a violation of somebody's sexual identity?
Well, I don't get into those issues in the book, but I would say, to answer your question, it is completely appropriate for the state to guard the individual conscience with regard to religious freedom. That is an American tradition. It goes back to the colonial foundings, all the way back to the first settlement of this continent by the settlers, by the colonists, who ultimately founded the 13 colonies and founded this nation. To break from that tradition would be to depart from what it means to be an American. So take religious identity out of the picture for a moment. Just you're a Christian, you're not a Christian, whatever your religion is. If you're an American and you care about America, you should care about the tradition of the harmony between religion and freedom in America. That has been sustained by every single generation that has carried this country along. To depart from that would be a radical departure. We would not be living in the America that we know today. I would say one other thing, that it seems to me that the LGBTQ movement has become something of a religion in itself, seeking to supplant traditional religion in America. They use many of the same motifs, many of the same bases for their arguments in order to advance their agenda. And it's if that's right, then it's a false religion. It's a religion that overthrows moral law that has been built into the created order by God. And so I don't think that's not part of our tradition, and I think as a false religion, it's something that Christians, I think, ought to oppose for sure.
There's a proverb that says, when a land transgresses, it has many rulers, but with a man of understanding and knowledge, its stability will long continue. The idea here is that when people live without regard to their neighbors and without moral boundaries, then you need more government to restrain people who've gone off the rails. So if people are going to flourish, God's truth must be embraced. After all, God tells us who we are, what's our purpose, and how to live in harmony with our fellow man. Christians should understand what God's Word says and how to think biblically about the issues so that they can engage well. To stay up to date with what's going on in Kentucky, subscribe to CPC's newsletter. Go to CommonwealthPolicyCenter.org to subscribe, and you can also find other resources there. Thank you, and may God bless you. John, I do want to get back to your book, and you start out early on with the question of what does it mean to be an American? And you give several examples of American citizens who were either deprived of their rights or their standing in society. You mentioned Rosa Parks, Booker T. Washington, Clara Boothe Luce, and you said that each of them shared certain key American traits. And you go on to say they lived with purpose. They set out to leave their worlds better than they found them. They were optimistic and not cynical, sentimental, or utopian, but realistic about their world and the obstacles in front of them. And they were key historical figures that we look up to because they overcame serious obstacles and serious injustices in their time. Could you speak to how they were shaped, or how their response and how they responded? What caused them to respond the way that they did? Because today, I think you and I would agree that there are still injustices. We live in a fallen Genesis 3 world. Our country and our system is not perfect, although I think it's a pretty good government that we have. We've got a lot of things going for us. But the response today, and here's what I'm getting at, we see agitators, we see people who are clamoring for more rallies and protests and just kind of a free-for-all, just being against it, just kind of the unspoken mentality might be burn it down.
Yeah.
Right? So what led to Booker T. Washington and Rosa Parks' response? Do you know what led to that? What was different about them than maybe today's leaders who are clamoring against injustice?
I think what motivated them was that they saw the injustice in front of them, that they had to live in the midst of the injustice, And it's I think indisputable that one of the reasons why they recognized the injustice and had hope to overthrow the injustice was that they lived in an American system that held up ideals of human liberty, human dignity, and innate human rights. That American ideals guided them along, gave them a vision for how to overthrow injustice. Without those American ideals, there wouldn't have been any kind of a frame of reference for them. There wouldn't have been a path forward for them. Now, Claire Booth Luce didn't face racial injustice. She was white, of course, but as a woman coming through in Washington, D.C. and in New York City in her younger days, in the 40s and 50s, she faced her share of obstacles as well. She was a congresswoman from Connecticut in the 40s. She was the first woman to serve as an ambassador to represent the United States abroad. She was an ambassador to Italy in the 50s. She won the Congressional Medal of Freedom, and it was given to her by Ronald Reagan in 1981 at the very end of her life, or 82, one of those years early on in his administration. And her path forward was also the same thing. American ideals. That was the frame of reference, American tradition. So I asked the question in the book, were these people Americans? What does it mean to be an American? I think that our friends on the left often disparage America, and Americanism, and Americanness, and American identity. Think of America as an experiment in degeneracy, going back to, slavery and things like the 1619 Project. But that, I think, is a power move. I don't think that anybody realistically really believes that, because they don't live that way. They enjoy the blessings that America offers them. They enjoy the freedom that America gives them, and they live their ordinary lives that way. And so when they attack and disparage America, I don't even think they really mean it.
John, you mentioned the 1619 Project in your book. You just mentioned it a moment ago. And this is something where you have major legacy media outlets that promoted this idea. I believe it was the New York Times that was behind it. And the idea behind the 1619 Project was that America was built not in this idea of ordered liberty, where there's a creator who endows us with freedom and liberty, but the idea that America was based on slavery. And they build an academic case for it. I think it's a faulty case. I don't think it's substantiated what they're saying, but people believe it. This is a legacy major media outlet promoting an idea of America being founded on injustice. And many people believe that and follow it and are angry, that have become angered over it. How do you respond to that?
Yep.
What do you do with that?
I talk about that quite a bit in the book. It has a lot to do with how we think historically, how we look back at the past. It has something to do with the quality of our education, our historical education. I think that if we think about history not in terms of good and evil, so what I tell students often is that history is not like Star Wars. It's not. In Star Wars, you got the dark side and you got the good side. Yeah. In Star Wars, you got the Empire and you got the Rebellion. And Luke Skywalker is pure. Leia is pure. They haven't done anything wrong. They haven't impressed anybody. Han Solo is like the baddest guy in there. He's like the worst. He's a smuggler, but his crime is kind of cute. And then he has this redemption at the end of Episode 4. Yeah. But then the bad people, they're dressed up in Nazi uniforms. So they're baddies right off the bat. We recognize them. History is not that. History is not a story of just good versus evil. The way that we want to tell the American story is we want to put truth front and center. We want to tell the truth. So we don't want to, sweep the bad stuff under the rug. But we also don't want to take the bad examples in American history and make them the paragon of what it means to be an American either, because that's not the only story. We don't want to cherry pick the things from the American narrative that fit our political point of view. And I think that that's what a lot of people do, and I don't know that they mean to do it, but it's what they've been taught to do.
John, if I could interrupt, that happens on both sides of the
does,
political aisle, doesn't it?
absolutely. It
Political right
absolutely-
and the political left.
Yeah, absolutely. It happens.
And to
on
your
both.
credit, as I read through your book, you acknowledge some major failures in our society, in our systems, when it comes to justice, and you gave it fair treatment, and I applaud you for that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's necessary to do that. Now, when it comes to the balance sheet, America's historical balance sheet, the merits and the demerits. We've got plenty of demerits. We've got there's plenty of stories of oppression and violence and injustice on the demerit side. And we shouldn't make a secret of those things. We shouldn't minimize those things, and we shouldn't ignore those things. Because as conservatives, we're realists. And we, as you said, we live in a Genesis 3 world. But the fact is that America has been the greatest champion of freedom the world has ever seen. And we are beneficiaries of it. And the response to it is gratitude. Abraham Lincoln talked about how there's the ideal and then there's the way. The way is what we're on, and we're pursuing an ideal. The ideal are those ideals are written down for us in the Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Gettysburg Address, the Emancipation Proclamation, and so forth, the founding documents. Those founding documents provide the inspiration for us. They provide us with a path forward. They provided Booker T. Washington with a path forward, Frederick Douglass with a path forward, Zora Neale Hurston with a path forward, and so forth and so on. It was the inspiration for them as they fought against injustice. And on the balance sheet, America is a great country, and we should be proud to be Americans. We should stand for the national anthem and hold our hand over our heart and salute, know the words, and sing them whenever we have that opportunity, and sing them with sincerity and sing them with gusto, because we're grateful to be Americans.
And I think you argued this was the posture of Booker T. Washington and Rosa Parks, who were being discriminated against. Yeah. Booker T, born into slavery.
Born a slave.
And Rosa Parks, who suffered under Jim Crow laws and was unjustly kicked off of her bus seat in Alabama.
Yeah, and she was a freedom fighter. And her inspiration was her faith and her faith in America.
John, I would say that it's because of the framework of government and this idea of justice, but then also recourse through our court system and through the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble. That's Rosa Parks exercised that. The freedom fighters fought to restore their rights, and eventually they prevailed. It is because our system of government allowed for that without bloodshed. And that's one of the blessings of liberty.
That's right. Yeah.
John, we are just about out of time. We've got like 30 seconds here, and we haven't really gotten into your book. Would you be willing to come back and do another segment and actually dig into your book?
That would be wonderful.
That would be great. This is a fascinating conversation. I hope all of the listeners and those tuned in are enjoying it. And the purpose here is to help us to think historically and also Christianly about the challenges we face in this day and age regarding the balance between religion and public life, specifically Christians in a Christian view as it relates to government and public policy formation. And this is what we do at the Commonwealth Policy Center. And for those of you not yet getting our email updates, go to our website, commonwealthpolicycenter.org, and sign up to get our monthly email updates. Again, it's commonwealthpolicycenter.org. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.